Most people have been taught to see trauma as something broken, something you must fix, irasi, or lock away in the back of your memory. It's been painted as a wound that should close forever, a crack in your wholeness, a mistake that should never have happened. But what if that view is not only incomplete, but entirely backwards? What if the pain you've been running from is not the wall in your path, but the very doorway to a deeper dimension of yourself? Think of it this way. Life has a strange way of using hardship as an invitation. Trauma is not the enemy. It is a threshold. It is a secret gate that leads you closer to the essence of who you truly are. Not the self that society applauds when everything looks polished and perfect, but the raw self, the soul that has walked through fire and discovered it could still breathe. I want you to picture this, a seed buried deep in the soil. From the outside, it looks like darkness has swallowed it. But from within, something extraordinary is happening. The pressure of the soil, the weight above it, the invisible tension, that is exactly what awakens the seed to grow roots, to push upward, to become something more than it was before. Your trauma functions in the same way. What felt like suffocation was in fact the very condition that made your deeper life possible. Quantum physics has whispered this truth for over a century. The observer effect tells us that what we see is never separate from how we see it. Your trauma is not some outside intruder forcing itself upon you. It is entangled with your consciousness. The way you hold it in your awareness changes the reality of it. When you meet your pain with resistance, it hardens. When you meet it with curiosity, it shifts. When you allow compassion to color your observation, the entire field reorganizes. The same moment that once looked like a wound becomes a doorway to wisdom. I know. To the heart that has been battered. These words can sound almost impossible. And yet, haven't you felt it already? Even in small ways. That moment when you stopped running from your own tears and simply let them fall. Didn't the heaviness shift? If only a little. That's not weakness. That is consciousness remembering its power. Trauma is not your undoing. It is a reorganization of your energy. Like a river finding a new channel after hitting a rock. The water does not stop. It carves new paths, and in doing so, creates a landscape that could not have existed otherwise. You see, healing is not about returning to who you were before. That is a myth, a mirage. There is no going back. Consciousness cannot unknow what it has touched. You cannot shrink into a smaller version of yourself after the vastness of pain has expanded you. The real question is not, how do I become who I was, but rather, how do I inhabit who I am now? That is where the gift lies. And here is where it becomes even more beautiful. Your healing is never only your own. Every unresolved trauma vibrates into the collective field. It shapes your relationships, your family, your community, sometimes in ways you don't even realize. But the moment you begin to transform your relationship with pain, you are shifting the possibilities for everyone connected to you. Your ancestors who could not release it, your children and grandchildren who will no longer have to carry it, strangers who may never know your name but will feel the ripple of your presence. In the language of the quantum field, your healing sends waves that touch the entire web of humanity. So what does this mean for you? It means that trauma is not the punishment it appeared to be. It is the curriculum of consciousness. You are not here as a victim of random events. You are here as a participant in evolution, chosen to transmute patterns that have been looping for generations. Your suffering does not lose its reality, but it gains new significance. It becomes the raw material for awakening, not only for you, but for the collective. And let us not forget, you are not your memories of pain. You are the presence that has witnessed them all. You are the space in which they rise and fall. When you rest in that awareness, the grip of trauma begins to loosen on its own, not because you force it to, but because awareness is so much vaster than any story. Trauma is contracted energy. When it meets the open sky of consciousness, it slowly unravels. Like a clenched fist softening in warm water, Healing, then, is not about fixing yourself. It is about remembering what you truly are. The trauma is not your identity. It is your teacher. The scar is not evidence of your brokenness. It is the scripture of endurance, written in your body, reminding you that you have walked through storms and are still here. So perhaps it is time to stop asking, when will I finally be healed? And start asking, what is this experience inviting me to discover about myself? Trauma is not a mistake. It is not a curse. It is the soil from which your deepest capacities can grow compassion, resilience, authenticity, wisdom. Without it, many of these qualities would lie dormant, never awakened. You, my friend, are not broken. You are being reshaped. You are being expanded into someone who can hold more light, more depth, more love than before. And though the world may not always see it, your presence is becoming medicine not only for yourself, but for those who walk beside you. That is the quantum truth about trauma. It is not what happened to you. It is what is happening through you. It is life itself, disguised as pain, asking you to step into your larger self. And once you see that, once you allow it, everything changes. 1. Trauma as a laboratory of evolution. Life has a way of disguising its greatest teachers. They rarely arrive dressed in beauty or comfort. Instead, they come cloaked in hardship, in moments that feel unbearable, in nights when you wonder if you will ever see the morning. Trauma, in its raw form, often feels like betrayal by existence itself. Yet if we look closer, not with the eyes of fear, but with the quiet gaze of awareness, we begin to see something extraordinary. Trauma is not random. It is not an accident. It is the curriculum that consciousness designs when it wants to evolve. Imagine the universe as an artist, sculpting not with clay, but with experience. Every collapse, every heartbreak, every loss becomes a chisel in its hands. The blows hurt, yes, but each strike is carving out space within you for something greater to emerge. This is why I call trauma a laboratory of evolution. It is the sacred ground where your soul experiments, learns, and develops capacities you never knew were waiting to be born. Think back to a time when life knocked you down so hard, you didn't think you could get up. At first, it may have felt like pure destruction. But later, when you finally stood again, didn't you find yourself seeing the world differently? You noticed details others overlooked. You felt compassion in places where before you may have judged. You discovered a strength that only those who have walked through fire can carry. That strength wasn't there by accident. It was cultivated in the hidden workshop of your suffering. Quantum physics offers a metaphor here. When particles collide at high speeds, they break apart and reorganize into new patterns, creating matter that never existed before. Trauma works the same way with human consciousness. The collision feels violent, even chaotic, but it creates new configurations of awareness. Your old identity may crack, but in those cracks, something luminous begins to shine through. It's easy to believe that the collapse is the end, but collapse is also space-making. Think of a forest fire. At first glance, it looks like devastation: trees reduced to ash, animals scattered, silence where there was once life. But give it time, and you will see new shoots breaking through the soil, nourished by the very ash that seemed like destruction. Entire ecosystems are reborn from that cycle. Trauma works in you the same way. It burns down what no longer serves, even if you cling to it, and in doing so, creates fertile ground for new life. I remember speaking to a woman in her 70s who had lost her husband suddenly in her 40s. At the time, she felt as though her entire life had ended. She told me, "I didn't think I could live another day without him." And yet, 40 years later, she looked back with eyes full of tears. Not just of grief, but of gratitude. She had discovered reserves of courage she never knew existed. She had learned how to support other widows, how to stand strong for her children, how to live with both memory and presence in her heart. The loss, she said softly, was my teacher. It made me more human. That is the laboratory at work. But the laboratory of evolution is not comfortable, just as a seed must crack open to sprout, just as a star is born from cosmic collapse. Your consciousness must sometimes shatter its old container to find a larger one. Trauma feels unbearable because it is dismantling the operating system you once relied on. It forces you to question what you thought was true, who you thought you were, and how you thought life should be. And in that questioning, something new awakens. This is not to glorify suffering. Suffering is not necessary to prove your worth. But when suffering arrives, and it does for all of us, it can become raw material for growth. Consciousness is endlessly creative, capable of turning even the harshest experience into wisdom. Trauma becomes the alchemy that transforms limitation into expansion, contraction into openness, despair into resilience. Think of yourself standing at the edge of an ocean. The waves crash hard, knocking you off your feet again and again. At first, all you want is to fight them, to stand tall against their force. But eventually, you realize the secret. You don't resist the waves. You learn to move with them, to float, to trust that the current will carry you back to shore. Trauma is like those waves. The more you fight, the more exhausted you become. But when you allow yourself to float, to surrender not in defeat but in trust, you begin to discover strength in softness. The laboratory of evolution does not ask you to be perfect. It does not ask you to never break down or never cry. It simply asks you to stay present long enough for the deeper lesson to reveal itself. Sometimes that lesson is compassion. Sometimes it is humility. Sometimes it is the unshakable knowing that you can endure and still love. So if you are walking through trauma right now, know this: you are not being punished. You are not broken. You are being shaped, carved, expanded. What feels like ruin is often the very soil in which your highest self takes root. The fire you are enduring today may be the light that guides someone else tomorrow. When I say trauma is a laboratory of evolution, I don't mean it lightly. I mean it as someone who has felt the weight of nights that seemed endless, who has known the taste of despair and the slow, surprising dawn of healing. And I can tell you this: the same darkness that once felt unbearable can one day become the backdrop against which your light shines most clearly. So breathe. Allow. Trust that even in this, something sacred is unfolding. Because in the quantum truth of consciousness, nothing is wasted. Not even your pain. Especially not your pain. 2. The power of presence instead of resistance. There is a truth I learned the hard way, and perhaps you have too. The more we resist our pain, the tighter its grip becomes. We spend so much of our lives running from the memories, pushing against the feelings, trying to lock them away like unwanted guests. We fight our tears. We silence our anger. We numb our fear. But pain has a strange way of growing louder the more we try to shut it out. Trauma doesn't heal by being wrestled into silence. It heals when it is met with presence. Presence is not the same as fixing. Presence is not about rushing in with solutions or strategies, or the desperate demand that things be different. Presence is about sitting quietly with what is. It's the way a mother holds a crying child. Not scolding, not demanding the tears stop, but simply being there, offering warmth, offering safety, offering the space where the storm can pass. Trauma, like that child, does not need your punishment or your denial. It needs your presence. I often think of it this way: pain is a clenched fist inside you. Resistance makes that fist tighten, makes the knuckles ache, makes the whole body rigid. But presence is the warm water into which that fist is placed. Slowly, without force, the fingers uncurl. Slowly, the grip loosens, and what once felt like suffocation begins to soften. This is the quiet power of allowing. It may sound simple, but it is not easy. Most of us were taught that strength means control. We were told to hold it together, to stay strong, to keep moving forward. We became experts at pretending. But pretending is a kind of resistance, and resistance is exhausting. The body keeps the score. As they say, the unacknowledged pain lingers in the muscles, in the breath, in the tension behind your eyes. And yet, the moment you allow yourself to stop resisting, even just for a breath, you open the door for energy to move again. I remember a season of my life when I was carrying a grief so heavy I thought it would crush me. I kept trying to outrun it, filling my days with noise, distracting myself with work, with endless conversations, with anything that kept me from sitting still. But no matter how fast I ran, the grief was always there, like a shadow clinging to my heels. One evening, exhausted from the fight, I sat alone in silence. For the first time, I didn't push it away. I simply allowed it to be. I wept until I thought there were no tears left. And then something unexpected happened. In the middle of the storm, I felt a stillness, a deep calm, almost tender, rose beneath the waves. It was as if my pain had been waiting all along, not for me to conquer it, but for me to welcome it home. That night taught me what presence truly means. It is not about fixing. It is not about erasing. It is about becoming spacious enough to hold what hurts without collapsing under it. Trauma is contracted energy. Presence is the space that lets it expand, breathe, and eventually dissolve back into flow. When we resist, we freeze the pain in place. When we allow, the pain begins to move. And in that movement, it transforms into wisdom. Think of a river. When rocks block its path, the water doesn't fight to erase them. It flows around, over, through. The river remains. The river presence is like that river. It doesn't deny the rock. It doesn't waste its energy resisting what is God. It simply allows, and in the allowing, the landscape itself is reshaped. Trauma. 2. Reshapsus. Not when we resist, but when we allow the water of awareness to keep flowing. Presence also shifts the way we see ourselves. Resistance says, I am broken. I must fix this. Presence says, I am whole enough to hold this, even as it hurts. Resistance narrows the world to the size of the wound. Presence expands the world to include both the wound and the sky above it. In presence, pain is no longer the enemy. It becomes a messenger, carrying information from the deepest layers of your being. And once you learn to listen, the message is often not one of punishment, but of guidance. I know there's a voice inside that whispers, if I stop resisting, won't the pain overwhelm me? Won't it drown me? I used to believe that too. But the truth is, resistance is what drowns us. Allowing is what teaches us how to float. When you stop fighting, you discover that you are not the pain, you are the ocean vast enough to hold it. And in that realization, the waves no longer terrify. They rise, they fall, and you remain. Presence doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean you do nothing about your life or your healing. It means that whatever steps you take are rooted not in fear of the pain, but in companionship with it. You learn to walk with your trauma, to listen to it, to understand the language it speaks. And slowly, the sharp edges soften. Slowly, the same pain that once silenced you begins to teach you. It teaches patience, compassion, humility, resilience. It teaches you that love is not the absence of pain, but the courage to remain open, even when pain is here. There's a line I often return to. Your scars are sacred texts. They are not just reminders of suffering. They are scriptures written in the language of endurance, and you cannot read them if you're always trying to erase them. You can only read them when you sit still long enough, present enough, to listen, So if you are weary from fighting, if you are tired of running from the memories, I want to invite you into presence. Just for a breath, stop resisting. Let yourself feel whatever arises. Cry if the tears come. Sit in silence if the words won't form. Notice that even in the middle of your pain, there is also something steady, watching it all, the awareness within you that cannot be harmed. That is who you are. Trauma does not need you to defeat it. It only asks for your presence, so that it can finally unfold back into flow. And when it does, when you give up the fight and offer your presence instead, something beautiful begins to happen. Pain no longer feels like the end of your story. It becomes the soil where wisdom grows. It becomes the place where your heart learns to open wider than you ever thought possible. That is the quiet miracle of presence. 3. Your true identity. There comes a moment, often after years of wrestling with your pain, when you begin to glimpse a deeper truth. It arrives quietly, like a soft dawn breaking after a long night. The realization is this: you are not the story of your trauma. You are not the memories that replay in the mind, nor the emotions that rise and fall like waves. You are not even the scars that remain on the body or in the heart. You are something much larger, much freer, much more enduring. You are awareness itself. Think for a moment of the sky. Storms roll in violent, loud, overwhelming. The clouds gather. Thunder shakes the ground. Lightning flashes across the horizon. But beneath it all, behind it all, the sky itself is untouched. The storm never wounds the sky. It passes through, and the sky remains vast, unbroken, steady. This is who you truly are. Your trauma, no matter how fierce, is the storm. But your essence, your pure consciousness, is the sky. For years, I mistook the storm for who I was. Every memory of hurt, every surge of shame or anger, I thought it defined me. I thought, this is me. This is what I've become. But those were passing weather systems. They were experiences moving through the field of my awareness, not the field itself. The shift began when I stopped identifying with the storm and started remembering the sky. It's not an easy shift. The mind clings tightly to the stories of pain. It replays the scenes, sometimes for decades. As if by replaying them it can finally change the ending. The heart clings to emotions, as though holding them tightly might prevent them from happening again. But freedom begins the moment you realize you are not the replay. You are the witness of the replay. You are not trapped in the loop. You are the presence within which the loop appears. This perspective changes everything. Suddenly, the memories no longer feel like prison walls. They are still there. Yes, but you are not confined by them. You can watch them arise and pass without becoming them. Like watching a bird fly across the open sky, you see it. You acknowledge it. But you know you are not the bird. You are the openness it flies through. And when you begin to live from that recognition, trauma itself starts to transform. Not because the past vanishes, but because you are no longer living as the past. You are living as the awareness that holds both the past and the present, without being diminished by either. This is not about erasing what happened. It is about expanding into the truth that you are infinitely more than what happened. I once met a man who had survived unimaginable loss. His wife and daughter were killed in an accident, and for years he was consumed by grief. Every day was the same storm replaying. But slowly, with time, he began to discover moments of peace, not because he forgot, but because he realized that even in his grief, there was something inside him that remained untouched. He told me, I began to feel that there is a part of me death could not touch. The part of me that still watches the sunrise, that still feels the wind on my face, that still loves, even when love hurts. That part, he realized, was his true identity. Trauma wants you to believe you are smaller than you are. It whispers that you are broken, that you are damaged goods, that your worth has been permanently diminished. But those whispers come from the storm, not from the sky. And storms always pass. The sky never does. This is why presence is so essential. When you sit quietly with your experience, when you stop running and simply observe, you begin to notice that there is a watcher inside you that is never harmed. That watcher has been present since your earliest memories. It was there before the trauma, during the trauma, and it remains here now. It is the part of you that cannot be shattered, cannot be stained, cannot be destroyed. It is your true identity. And here is the beauty: once you anchor yourself in that awareness, the trauma begins to lose its power. The memories may still come, but they no longer define you. The emotions may still rise, but they no longer control you. You begin to move through life not as a prisoner of the storm, but as the free and open sky that allows all weather to pass. I know this may sound like a lofty idea when you are in the depths of pain, but this truth is not just philosophy, it is practical. The next time a painful memory arises, pause, take a breath, ask yourself, who is aware of this memory right now? And then notice the awareness itself is untouched. The awareness is calm. The awareness is not broken. That awareness is you. This shift is the most profound healing possible, because healing is not about changing the past. It's about changing your relationship to the past. And when you identify with the witness instead of the wound, you discover freedom, even while carrying the memory. The chains fall away, not because the past disappeared, but because you are no longer mistaking the chains for yourself. So today, if you carry heavy stories, if you feel weighed down by the identity of the one who was hurt, I want you to hear this. You are not that story. You are not that wound. You are the space vast enough to hold it all and still remain whole. You are the sky. The storm may rage, but you remain. And when you live from that recognition, life changes. You are no longer afraid of the weather. You are no longer consumed by the thunder. You can allow all of it, joy and sorrow, pain and love, to pass through you without defining you. That is the essence of true freedom. So let yourself remember, you are not your trauma. You are not even your thoughts about your trauma. You are the unbroken awareness, the boundless sky, the eternal witness. And in that remembering, when you step into the deepest healing, there is the healing that comes not from fixing yourself, but from realizing you were never broken. 4. Trauma. As the blueprint for hidden gifts, life has a mysterious way of planting seeds in the very soil of our suffering. At first glance, trauma looks only like devastation, like something that strips you bare and leaves you emptied. But if you stay with it long enough, if you sit with it instead of pushing it away, you begin to see that each wound carries within it a hidden gift. It is almost as if consciousness itself designs an opposite power to emerge from the very place where you feel weakest. Think of abandonment. The sting of being left behind can cut deeper than words can describe. It makes you question your worth, makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere. And yet, hidden inside that experience is often the seed of unconditional self-love. When no one else is there to remind you of your value, you begin to learn how to remind yourself. When the world seems to turn its back, you learn how to turn toward your own heart. Over time, you may discover a strength in standing alone, a dignity in knowing your worth does not depend on anyone's approval. What once felt like emptiness slowly reveals itself as the space where self-love is born. Or think of betrayal. Few things pierce the soul like trusting someone deeply and then feeling that trust shattered. Betrayal makes you doubt your judgment, your ability to know what is true. But inside that breaking is a gift too, the awakening of intuition. Betrayal forces you to listen to the quiet signals you ignored, before the subtle unease in your body, the small voice you dismissed. It teaches you to trust yourself above all else, to know that truth has always lived inside you. What once felt like a cruel wound becomes the birthplace of discernment. And then there is powerlessness, the helplessness of moments when you had no control, when the world seemed too big, too heavy, too merciless. In those moments, you may feel stripped of strength, like a leaf caught in the wind. But look again, powerlessness often awakens the deepest inner strength. When the outer world refuses to bend, the inner world learns to rise. You discover the resilience that doesn't come from controlling circumstances, but from standing firmly in your own center. Out of the ashes of helplessness, true inner power begins to glow. This is the paradox of trauma. Each experience carries within it its own mirror image. Darkness hides the seed of light. Loss carries the seed of new beginnings. Pain carries the seed of compassion. It's not that the suffering is good. It isn't. It hurts. It breaks. It scars. But the intelligence of consciousness is so profound that it plants within every wound the potential for its opposite gift. Trauma becomes the blueprint through which life draws out hidden dimensions of who you are. I've seen this in countless lives. A man who grew up in poverty later became a fierce advocate for justice, using the memory of his hunger to fuel compassion for others. A woman who endured years of silence in an oppressive relationship eventually became a voice of empowerment, teaching others how to speak their truth. What looked like destruction in one chapter became the foundation for service in the next eos. The pattern repeats itself in ways that are hard to deny. Trauma takes something from you, yes, but it also creates the conditions for something else to grow. Something that could not have been awakened without the rupture. It is as if life uses the crack to let the light in. As Leonard Cohen once sang, the wound becomes the opening becomes the doorway. And through that doorway, a new gift steps forward. When you begin to see trauma this way, your relationship to it shifts. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin to ask, "What gift is trying to emerge from this?" That single change of perspective can transform despair into curiosity. It doesn't make the pain vanish, but it changes the way you hold it. You begin to carry it not as a chain, but as a seed. And seeds, when planted in the soil of presence, always grow. I know it's not easy. When you are in the middle of abandonment, betrayal, or powerlessness, it feels like nothing good could ever come of it. The pain is too raw, the wound too deep. And yet, if you look back at your life, hasn't it already happened before? Haven't there been times when you thought, "This is the end," only to later discover that it was a beginning, that what seemed like a loss eventually revealed a strength you didn't know you had? Life's gifts rarely arrive wrapped in comfort. They often arrive wrapped in struggle. There is a simple metaphor I often return to: a pearl. Pearls are born when an irritant, a grain of sand, lodges itself in the soft body of an oyster. It is uncomfortable, even painful, but the oyster does not fight the grain. It coats it, layer by layer, until what was once an irritant becomes something luminous, something precious. In the same way, your trauma may be the grain of sand that life is asking you to coat with awareness, compassion, and resilience, until it becomes your pearl. So if you carry the memory of abandonment, ask yourself, is life inviting me to learn radical self-love? If you carry the wound of betrayal, is life inviting me to trust my intuition more deeply? If you carry the weight of powerlessness, is life inviting me to discover inner strength that no circumstance can take away? These are not questions to rush through. They are invitations to sit with, to let ripen slowly. And when the answers come, you will see trauma was never just punishment. It was the shadow blueprint of a gift. Your life is not defined by what hurt you, but by what emerged through you because of it. The gifts of love, intuition, strength, compassion, they are not in spite of your trauma. They are born through it. So yes, the wound may always be part of your story, but the wound is not the ending. It is the place where the gift was planted. And when you tend that seed with presence, one day, you will find that what once felt like your deepest weakness has become the very strength you offer to the world. 5. The quantum effect of observation. There's a mystery in life that science has only begun to put words to, though the soul has always known it. In quantum physics, they call it the observer effect, the discovery that the very act of observing changes what is being observed. It sounds abstract, but in truth, you and I live this reality every single day. The way you look at your pain, the lens through which you hold your trauma, alters the very shape it takes inside of you. When you see your trauma only as a scar, it remains a scar, fixed, heavy, and unchanging. The mind clings to it, replaying the same narrative again and again, as if it were carved in stone. But when you begin to look at your trauma as information, as data your soul has been carrying for you, something begins to shift. The scar loosens its grip. The wound becomes a teacher. What once felt like a dead end reveals itself as a doorway. I remember the first time I truly grasped this for myself. I had always seen my past experiences as evidence of how broken I was. Every memory became another reason to believe I was less than whole. And yet, one day, sitting quietly, I asked myself, what if these moments were not evidence against me, but lessons for me? That single shift of observation changed everything. The same memories, the same feelings, but now they carried meaning instead of condemnation. They became teachers instead of jailers. This is what the quantum effect of observation reveals. Experience is not separate from awareness. The way you hold an experience, whether in judgment, in curiosity, in fear, or in compassion, shapes how that experience unfolds inside of you. Consciousness and life are entangled, woven together, like dancers in an endless rhythm. Change the step of one, and the whole dance changes. Think of it like holding a photograph. If you stare at a picture of yourself from a painful chapter, you might see only the sorrow, the weakness, the failure. But if you soften your gaze, if you allow yourself to see more widely, you might notice the courage in your eyes, the resilience in your posture, the sheer miracle that you endured. The photograph hasn't changed, but the way you observe it has, and suddenly, its meaning is transformed. Trauma works the same way. The facts of what happened do not rewrite themselves, but the meaning, the way it lives inside of you, shifts as your observation shifts. And that shift is not small. It is the difference between living as a victim and living as a witness, between being trapped in the past and walking free in the present. This doesn't mean you pretend your pain didn't happen. It doesn't mean you plaster positivity over deep wounds. That would only be another form of resistance. What it means is that you allow yourself to look differently, not with denial, but with presence. You ask not, why did this happen to me, but what is this showing me about who I am? You begin to notice that your trauma is not just a mark of suffering, but a map leading you to hidden strengths. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone who feels invisible, overlooked their entire life. If they observe this story through the lens of bitterness, it hardens them. They become convinced they don't matter, and the world reflects that back. But if they shift their observation, if they look at that same experience as training for seeing others who are overlooked, suddenly their invisibility births a gift. The ability to notice, to care, to truly see those who feel unseen. The story hasn't changed, but the meaning has. The observation has altered the reality. You might ask, but isn't that just reframing? Isn't that just positive thinking? No. It's deeper than that. Positive thinking often tries to paste a smile over pain, to convince yourself something bad is actually good. This is not that. This is about recognizing that your consciousness is not separate from your experience. They are entangled at the root. When you look with judgment, you collapse the potential into more judgment. When you look with compassion, you collapse the potential into healing. It is not pretending. It is the physics of awareness itself. I sometimes picture trauma as a tangled knot. If you stare at it with frustration, it only tightens. But if you bring a different quality of attention, gentle, patient, curious, you begin to see where the threads can loosen. It's the same knot, the same history, but the way you hold it changes whether it strangles you or frees you. And here is the quiet miracle. The shift of observation is always available. You don't have to wait until your pain disappears. You don't have to erase the past. You simply bring a new quality of presence to it. You notice the lesson, the resilience, the gift hidden beneath the wound. The act of seeing differently begins to change the shape of what you see. I won't pretend it happens all at once. Some days you will still see only the scar. That's okay. But each time you pause, breathe, and choose to look again with softer eyes, with a more open heart, you are altering the dance. You are teaching your consciousness to collapse into new possibilities, to step into a new rhythm, and over time, the story you carry begins to rewrite itself from within. So if you feel trapped in your trauma, ask yourself gently, how am I observing it? Am I staring at it like a prison wall? Or am I willing to see it as a doorway? Am I looking with resistance? Or am I allowing curiosity? These questions are not small. They are the keys that unlock transformation. Because in the end, your trauma is not fixed. It is potential. And potential always waits for the gaze of consciousness to bring it into form. When you change your observation, you change your experience. And when you change your experience, you change your life. 6. From the personal to the collective. One of the hardest things to see when you are in the middle of your own pain is that it is not yours alone. Trauma feels deeply personal. Your heartbreak, your memories, your sleepless nights. And in a way, it is. But beneath the surface, trauma is also a thread woven into a much larger fabric. The suffering you carry vibrates outward into the field of human consciousness, like ripples spreading across a still pond. And the healing you embrace, just the same, does not end with you. It moves outward too, carrying light into places you may never see. I remember once sitting with a man who had endured years of abuse as a child. He told me he often felt as if he was carrying not only his own pain, but the pain of his father, and his father's father, and generations before him. At first, he thought this was just his imagination. But slowly, as he began to work with his wounds, he noticed something remarkable when he softened into compassion for himself. His relationship with his father, though his father had already passed, seemed to change. The bitterness lessened. The heaviness in his chest began to lift. He realized that his healing was not only his own. It was reaching backward and forward through time, loosening knots that had been tied for decades, maybe even centuries. Science may call this epigenetics or field theory. Spiritual teachers may call it ancestral healing. But whatever words we choose, the truth is simple. Your healing matters not only for you, but for all those connected to you. And we are all connected, more deeply than we often realize. When you begin to heal, the people around you feel it. They may not know why, but something shifts. Your children, your friends, your community. They begin to breathe easier because you are no longer transmitting the same patterns of fear or anger that once consumed you. Every time you interrupt a cycle of violence with gentleness, every time you choose forgiveness instead of revenge, every time you meet your pain with awareness instead of resistance, you are breaking a pattern in the field of human consciousness. And the reverse is true as well. When we ignore or suppress our trauma, it doesn't simply disappear. It leaks out into the spaces around us. It shapes the way we speak to others, the way we raise our children, the way we create or destroy community. This is why unhealed pain often travels down family lines, repeating itself in new forms until someone chooses to face it. In that moment, when one person chooses to heal, they are not only freeing themselves, they are freeing everyone who came before. and everyone who will come after. Think of it as a great tapestry. Each thread is an individual life, but no thread stands alone. The knots and tangles of one thread affect the entire pattern. When you smooth the knot in your own thread, you smooth the whole tapestry. You may not see it immediately, but the harmony you create ripples outward, making the entire design more beautiful. I once heard a grandmother describe how she realized this truth. She had carried shame her whole life. Shame passed down from her own mother, who was silenced and diminished in her marriage. One day, she decided she could no longer bear to pass that silence to her daughters and granddaughters. She began to speak her truth gently, but firmly. She sought healing not only for herself, but for all the women who had come before her and those who would follow. She told me, "When I began to heal, I felt as though my mother's spirit stood taller too, as though the women of my family could finally breathe." That is the collective dimension of healing, and it does not stop with family. We are part of communities, cultures, nations, a species. The trauma of racism, war, poverty, neglect, all of it lives, not just in individuals, but in the collective nervous system. When you heal a wound of rejection in yourself, you help to heal the pattern of exclusion in the world. When you transform anger into compassion within your heart, you shift the frequency of human interaction everywhere, even if only slightly, but slight shifts add up. Enough drops create a river. Enough rivers create an ocean. Sometimes people say, "But my healing is so small. What difference could it make?" I always answer with this. Have you ever walked into a room where someone was radiating peace? Didn't you feel it? Even if they never said a word, that is the power of one healed heart. It ripples out far beyond what the eye can see. You may never know the strangers whose lives are softened because of your presence, but the quantum field records every vibration. Nothing is wasted. This is why each step you take through your pain is more than personal survival. It is a step for humanity itself. Each time you choose love over fear, compassion over judgment, presence over resistance, you are voting for a more conscious world. You are placing your energy into the collective pool from which all of us drink. Your trauma is not just your own burden. It is part of the human story. And your healing is not just your own gift. It is part of humanity's awakening. Every time you meet your pain with awareness, you become a lighthouse, not only guiding yourself through the storm, but casting light for countless others who are still lost at sea. So if the weight you carry feels too heavy, remember this: you are not carrying it alone. You are carrying it on behalf of something larger. And every moment of healing you allow is a moment of liberation for the whole. Your story matters. Your healing matters. Your presence in this world matters more than you know. And in this way, the personal and the collective are not separate at all. They are two sides of the same truth. Heal yourself, and you heal the world. Heal the world, and you feel yourself healed. This is the dance of consciousness, weaving us together, reminding us that no step is ever taken in isolation. 7. Survival mechanisms. Intelligence in disguise. When we think of survival mechanisms, we often judge them. We call them weaknesses, flaws, or bad habits. We look back at the ways we coped and say, "I shouldn't have done that. I should have been stronger. I should have known better." But I want to invite you to see them differently. Those very mechanisms, the walls you built, the masks you wore, the ways you hid or fought or numbed yourself were not mistakes. They were intelligence in disguise. They were the river finding a way around the rock. Imagine a river flowing freely until it meets a massive stone in its path. The water doesn't stop. It doesn't collapse into despair. It doesn't curse itself for not being strong enough to push the rock away. No, the river simply splits, carves a new path, finds a way forward. That is what your survival mechanisms did for you. They allowed you to keep moving when life placed immovable stones in your way. Maybe as a child you learned to stay quiet, to disappear into the background, because speaking up wasn't safe. At the time, silence protected you. Maybe later in life you learned to overwork, to keep yourself busy every moment, because stillness brought memories you weren't ready to face. That busyness protected you. Maybe you built walls around your heart so no one could hurt you again. That armor protected you. Were those strategies perfect? No. Do they still serve you today? Perhaps not. But at the time, they were ingenious. They were your body and mind creating solutions to impossible situations. They kept you alive. They carried you here. And that means they deserve not shame, but respect. I know how easy it is to look back and feel regret. I've done it myself. I've looked at the years I spent hiding behind walls, pretending I was fine, and thought, what a waste. Why couldn't I have been braver? But when I soften, I see it differently. I see a younger version of myself who was doing the best he could with the tools he had. I see someone clever enough to find a way, even when the world felt unbearable. That shift from judgment to gratitude is a powerful part of healing. The truth is, survival mechanisms are not signs of brokenness. They are signs of life insisting on itself. They are proof that even in the darkest places, something in you refused to give up. Something in you was creative enough to find a path, however imperfect, through the impossible. And when the time comes, when you are safe enough, you can lay those strategies down. But first, honor them for the bridge they were. Think of them like old clothes that once fit but no longer do. They kept you warm. They protected you. But you've grown. Now they feel tight, restrictive. You don't need them anymore. But that doesn't mean they were wrong. It simply means they did their job, and now it's time for something new. This is where compassion becomes essential. Healing is not about attacking the parts of yourself that coped. It's about gently thanking them and releasing them when they no longer serve. If you learn to stay invisible, presence will help you learn to be seen again. If you learn to numb, awareness will help you learn to feel again. If you learn to fight every battle, softness will help you learn to rest. There is deep wisdom in this process. Trauma forced you to adapt, and in adapting, you developed capacities you may not even recognize yet. Silence may have taught you how to listen. Overwork may have taught you resilience. Guardedness may have taught you discernment. Even the strategies that no longer serve carry seeds of wisdom within them. I once worked with a man who grew up in a home full of chaos. As a child, he learned to control everything he could: his grades, his routines, his surroundings, because it gave him a sense of stability. As an adult, that same need for control was strangling him. He couldn't relax. He couldn't trust. Couldn't let go. At first, he hated that part of himself. But when he realized that control had been his lifeline as a boy, he softened. He began to see the intelligence behind it. And from there, he could transform it. He learned to keep the gift, his ability to create order in difficult situations, while releasing the fear that made him cling so tightly. That is the invitation for you. 2. Don't discard your survival mechanisms as if they were shameful mistakes. See them as temporary shelters you built when the storm raged. They may not be homes to live in forever, but they kept you dry until the storm passed. Honor them, thank them, and then step into the open air when you are ready. What once saved you may now limit you. That's okay. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you evolved. It means you are ready for a new chapter. Healing is not about erasing your old strategies. It's about integrating their wisdom while stepping into greater freedom. So if you find yourself frustrated with your own patterns, take a breath. Pause before judgment. Ask yourself, how did this mechanism serve me once? What did it protect me from? What gift did it carry hidden inside? You may discover that what you once called weakness was actually creativity. What you once called damage was actually resilience. And when you can see that, When you can meet even your coping mechanisms with compassion, you begin to experience freedom. Not the freedom of rejecting your past, but the freedom of embracing it, of honoring every step that carried you here. You realize that nothing was wasted, not even the detours, not even the defenses. It was all intelligence, disguised as survival. And perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons trauma teaches, even in our most fragile moments. There is a brilliance at work within us, a current that insists on life. The river never stops flowing. It simply finds another way. And so did you. 8. Trauma as a two-way current through time. There is a mystery in life that both science and spirit are slowly learning to describe. In the language of quantum physics, it is called retrocausality, the possibility that the future can ripple back and influence the past. At first, this idea feels impossible to the logical mind. How could something that has not yet happened affect what already has? But if you sit quietly, if you reflect on your own life, you may realize you have already felt this truth in your bones. Every time you take a step toward healing today, it is as if you are sending a message backwards through time to the younger version of yourself, the child who was scared, the teenager who felt invisible, the adult who thought they had to carry the weight alone. In some mysterious way, your healing now softens their burden. And at the very same time, you are sending healing forward into the future, shaping the version of yourself who will wake up tomorrow, next year, and decades from now. Healing is not bound to the narrow window of the present moment. It is a current that runs through your entire timeline. I remember a woman once telling me about a meditation she had during therapy. She was visualizing herself as a little girl, sitting on the floor of her childhood room, crying. For the first time in her adult life, she imagined walking into that room not as a child, but as the woman she had become. She knelt down, held her younger self in her arms, and whispered, "You're safe now. I'm here with you." Tears streamed down her face as she described it. She said it was as if the pain of that child, decades old, began to melt in her embrace. That moment of compassion in the present reached back and touched the past. The child in her memory was no longer alone. This is the two-way current of trauma and healing. When you ignore your pain, the echo reverberates not only in your present, but also into your future, your relationships, your choices, your sense of self. But when you meet your pain with presence and compassion, the echo changes. It reverberates backward, soothing the child you once were, and forward, strengthening the self you are becoming. Think of it like a river that flows both ways. The past is not a fixed stone behind you. It is part of the living stream of consciousness. When you place healing into the water today, it moves downstream to nourish your future. And just as beautifully, it moves upstream to quench the thirst of the younger self, who has been waiting all this time to be seen, to be comforted, to be held. Sometimes people describe the experience of healing as though they are remembering something they had forgotten, rather than learning something new. Have you felt that? That sensation of, "I knew this truth all along. I just forgot." That is the current of the future reaching back to you. It is the healed version of yourself whispering through time, guiding you gently toward the recognition that peace was always possible. And this truth is not only personal, it is collective. When you heal today, the shift can ripple backward through generations. The fear your grandmother carried but never faced. The silence your father lived under, but could never break your courage to face your own wounds, sends a vibration back through the family line. In the same way, it ripples forward so your children, your grandchildren, perhaps even those not yet born, do not have to carry the same burden. Your healing is never isolated. It runs along the entire fabric of time. I have felt this in my own life. There were nights when I sat with the grief of my younger years, and in the stillness, I could almost sense that child version of me leaning against my shoulder. I could feel his relief, his gratitude, as if the pain he once carried alone was now being held by the adult I had become. And sometimes, when I thought of my future self, the one who had already walked farther along this path, I could almost feel his strength flowing backward into me. It was as if he was whispering, "Keep going. You'll see. It's worth it." This is the paradox: healing is always in the present, and yet it touches every point along the timeline. Trauma may fracture time, keeping you stuck in moments of the past, trapped in cycles that echo into the future. But healing restores time to wholeness. It weaves together the fragments, reconnecting the child, the adult, and the elder you will one day be. It means that when you choose compassion for yourself right now, you are not only easing today's suffering, you are rewriting the way your entire story feels. You are giving that frightened child the comfort they never had. You are giving your future self a lighter heart to carry. You are proving that time does not imprison you. Consciousness is larger than time, and love moves in both directions. So if you wonder whether it is too late to heal, hear this: it is never too late. Because healing does not only move forward, it moves backward too. Your present awareness has the power to soothe wounds from decades ago. Your present courage has the power to protect generations yet unborn. Every breath of compassion you offer yourself today ripples across the river of time. It whispers to the child in you, "You are safe." It whispers to the future you are free. And it roots you in the present moment, where both truths meet. You are whole enough, right here, right now, to be the bridge across time. So remember, trauma does not lock you into a broken past. Healing is not a narrow road leading only forward. It is a current flowing in both directions, touching every part of your story. When you choose presence today, you are healing, not just this moment, but your entire timeline. And in that recognition, you can breathe a little deeper, knowing that nothing has been wasted. Not your past, not your present, not your future. All of it is part of the same river, and all of it can be touched by the healing you allow right now. 9. Trauma and the evolution of humanity. When you stand in the center of your own pain, it is easy to believe you are utterly alone. The memories, the grief, the weight, they feel like a private burden. No one else could possibly understand. And yet, there is a deeper truth. Every individual facing trauma is like a single cell in the body of humanity. And when one cell begins to heal, the entire body shifts. Your suffering, as personal as it feels, is also collective. The fear you carry has been carried by countless others. The loneliness you feel has echoed through generations. The shame you wrestle with is not just yours. It is part of a web woven through families, cultures, nations. When you choose to face it, to sit with it, to let it transform into wisdom, you are not only freeing yourself, you are updating the system for everyone connected to you. Think of humanity as a vast organism. Each of us is a cell in this body. When one cell is poisoned, the body suffers. When one cell begins to heal, the body grows stronger. The way you meet your trauma becomes a message to the whole. If you meet it with bitterness, the bitterness reverberates outward. If you meet it with awareness, with compassion, that too reverberates outward. It is like updating the software of a vast computer. Every time one person heals, the collective program becomes more capable of love, of resilience, of freedom. I once spoke with a woman who had endured decades of silence about her pain. She told me, "I thought I was carrying this just for me. But when I finally spoke, when I finally allowed myself to heal, my children looked lighter. They laughed more easily. My friends told me they felt braver. Just being around me." She discovered what so many of us eventually do, that our healing is never just for us. It is for everyone whose lives touch ours, even in small ways. And it does not stop there. The ripples move farther than we can see. A stranger may feel comfort in your presence without knowing why. A conversation you have today may inspire someone tomorrow, who in turn inspires another. Healing is contagious. It is one of the few contagions the world desperately needs. This is why trauma, as devastating as it feels, is also the raw material for evolution. Without trauma, humanity might remain stagnant, repeating the same patterns of fear and violence. But trauma pushes us to grow. It forces us to confront what is broken, to invent new ways of being, to awaken capacities we did not know we had. Pain becomes the fire that burns away illusion, and out of the ashes, something larger is born. I often think of humanity as being in a kind of chrysalis. The caterpillar cannot remain as it is forever. There comes a point when it dissolves, breaking down into something unrecognizable. In that messy, chaotic state, it would be easy to call the process destruction. But within that very chaos lies the blueprint of wings. Trauma is the chrysalis stage of humanity. Each individual who transforms their pain into wisdom is adding to the wings we will eventually unfurl together. And make no mistake, you are part of this. Every time you choose to meet your trauma with presence instead of resistance, you are participating in humanity's transformation. Every time you soften into compassion instead of hardening into anger, you are helping us all evolve. You may feel small, but your vibration adds to the frequency of the whole. One voice may not change the song, but many voices together create a chorus. From this perspective, your pain carries a sacred responsibility. Not responsibility in the sense of blame or burden, but in the sense of purpose. You are not just surviving for yourself. You are carrying a piece of humanity's evolution on your shoulders. The way you meet your trauma helps determine the path we all walk. That is the magnitude of your significance. It can feel overwhelming, but it is also profoundly empowering. To know that your healing matters not only to you, but to your children, your community, your species that is fuel to keep going. When the nights are dark and the work feels endless, remember, you are not healing in isolation. You are healing on behalf of the world. And here is the paradox: you don't have to do it perfectly. Even your smallest acts of awareness ripple outward. A single breath taken in presence instead of panic. A single moment of kindness to yourself instead of judgment. These are not trivial. They are frequencies, vibrations, signals sent into the field of humanity. The field records them. The field responds. So when you wonder, why me? Why this pain? Why this story? Consider that maybe your soul chose this path not as punishment, but as purpose. Trauma, in this light, is not only what happened to you, it is the curriculum through which consciousness itself is evolving. And you, in living through it, are one of its teachers. This is why I say trauma is not just yours. It is humanity's fuel for evolution. Every scar holds wisdom. Every wound carries a seed of compassion. Every healing heart becomes a lighthouse for others. And together, cell by cell, person by person, we are upgrading the software of the human race. So do not underestimate your significance. You are not just one person lost in pain. You are a vital part of a cosmic process. You are a thread in the fabric of awakening. Your healing is humanity's healing. Your evolution is our evolution. And when you remember that, perhaps you will feel less alone, knowing that every step you take toward the light is a step the whole world takes with you. Trauma as a bridge to wholeness. You see, trauma did not arrive to ruin you. It came to open you. It came to crack the shell you thought was your whole self, so that the deeper, truer self could emerge. It does not erase your wholeness. It cannot. What it does is invite you to remember a wholeness that was never lost. Healing, then, is not about returning to some untouched, perfect version of yourself. Healing is about expansion, about becoming a larger, deeper, more luminous expression of who you already are. I know this not as an idea, but as lived truth. There were nights when I thought my pain had swallowed me whole. Nights when I believed I would never feel light again. But sitting in the dark long enough, I began to notice something. The pain did not destroy me. It stripped me. Yes, it humbled me. But underneath it all, there was a quiet presence untouched by the storm. That presence had been there all along, waiting for me to notice. Trauma forced me to stop running long enough to feel it. This is the paradox when you finally stop fleeing from your pain. When you choose to sit down with it, something remarkable happens. The monster you've been running from turns out to be a teacher. The weight you thought was meant to crush you reveals itself as a key. The wound you thought was proof of your brokenness becomes the doorway to your strength. Trauma becomes a design, an evolutionary blueprint rather than a random mistake. And in that recognition, you no longer see yourself as damaged. You see yourself as a living testament to the truth that consciousness cannot be destroyed. Consciousness can be shaken. It can be stretched. It can be challenged in ways that feel unbearable. But it cannot be harmed. It cannot be broken. What trauma really does is teach consciousness how to love itself through the human experience. Think of it this way. When you look at a scar on your skin, you don't see just the injury. You see the healing too. The scar is proof that your body remembered how to mend itself. The same is true of your inner wounds. They are not just marks of what hurt you. They are evidence of what healed in you. Every time you sit with your pain instead of resisting it, every time you choose presence instead of denial, you are reinforcing this deeper truth. You are not fragile, glass that shatters. You are living light that bends and expands. And this expansion does not belong to you alone. When you choose to see trauma as a bridge instead of a barrier, you are not just crossing it for yourself. You are crossing it for all of us. Your courage adds to the collective courage. Your healing adds to the collective healing. Each time you choose to soften instead of harden, you are building the pathway that others will one day walk. So, trauma is no longer the obstacle. It becomes the bridge that carries you from the illusion of brokenness to the truth of your unbreakable nature. The bridge that carries humanity forward into a new way of being, where healing is not about fixing what's wrong, but about remembering what was always whole. I want you to pause here and breathe this in. You have never been truly broken. Not once. Even in your darkest hour, when you felt shattered, something in you remained intact. Something in you witnessed the pain, survived it, endured it. That witnessing self, that presence, is the real you, and it has never been harmed. When you begin to live from that place, life changes. You stop fearing the storms, because you know the sky cannot be harmed. You stop resenting the scars, because you know they are proof of healing. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What gift is life trying to open in me through this?" And that shift from resistance to acceptance, from fear to curiosity, is where freedom begins. I am not saying it is easy. Sitting with pain takes courage, perhaps the deepest courage a human can show. But the reward is profound. When you meet your trauma fully, you find that the very place you thought you would break becomes the place where you open. The very wound you thought was your prison becomes the doorway to your liberation. So remember this, you are not walking this path alone. Every step you take toward healing is a step humanity takes with you. Every time you choose presence over resistance, compassion over judgment, love over fear, you are lifting all of us. That is the sacred truth of being human. We rise together, and maybe that is the greatest gift trauma has to give. It reminds us that we are not just individuals struggling in isolation. We are part of something larger, something vast. Consciousness itself is evolving through us. Trauma is not the end of the story. It is the turning point, the place where life invites us to remember who we are and to carry that remembrance into the collective. So let your trauma become the bridge. Let it remind you that you are not broken. You are opening. You are not diminished. You are expanding. You are not defined by what happened. You are defined by how consciousness shines through you now. And one day, when you look back, you may see it clearly. The very thing you thought would destroy you was the thing that carried you home.